So yeah, thanks for coming. My Twitter handle is really tiny in the bottom right. We're just going to take a look at Vue.js. For those of you who don't know, it's a framework kind of in the similar bracket as React and Angular for building user interfaces for building apps. In 20 minutes, we're not going to be able to cover everything. That's kind of a disclaimer. So what I will say is that the documentation on Vue.js is very, very good. It's very comprehensive. There's a lot of examples you can play with as you go. So I'd encourage you to have a look there as well. Yeah, before we get cracking, a little bit about Vue. It's a JavaScript framework. It's authored by a guy called Evan Yu, used to work at Google, used to work on Angular. And basically when he left Google, he decided he'd take the bits of Angular he liked, make a more lightweight version. Vue was released in February 2014. Version 2 came out about 2 and a bit years later. We're now version 2.5.21 as of Tuesday. Version 3 is being spoken about. It's coming, I don't know when. But it's another framework. Is it being used? Well, if you look at the weekly download stats for the last year, for React, Angular, and Vue, you've got React, which is the top line, the orange, just under 4 million downloads a week. Angular, now about 2 million downloads a week. And then Vue, which is gradually increasing from, I think it's doubled roughly in the last year, from 350,000 downloads a week to 700,000. What you take from that is probably that Vue's not as used as the other two frameworks, which React has got Facebook, Angular's got Google, Vue has Evan. So I guess impressive, but the interesting thing is that Vue has more stars on GitHub than React. It's well above Vue in terms of number of forks, in terms of number of people who are following its repo on GitHub. So although maybe the adoption isn't there at the moment, it seems to be that people are at least interested in having a play. Yeah, so some code. The most basic Hello World app you can get in Vue. Like we do with most frameworks, you start with an index.html file. You have an element on the page that we want to use, so our app, the div with the app ID. We pull in Vue from CDN, and then we have some JavaScript we write ourselves, which looks like this. We create a new Vue instance. We tell it we want it to run on the app element, and we give it a template, which when you load your browser looks like that. Not groundbreaking, but that's the bare minimum you need to get a Vue app running in your browser. But we all know that really we're not going to be able to keep adding files like this and just have ridiculous number of script tags like we do now with the work we do. We're going to split things out into components, and Vue gives us two ways we can register components in our apps. The first way is what's called global registration. You call Vue.component. Your first argument is a unique name that you use everywhere across your app. In this case, Hello World. And you then, the second argument you give it is some options. So in this case, we're giving it some initial data, and then again, just a template, which would just say Hello Jordan in this case. And then elsewhere in your app, you can use the name that you passed in as your first argument in your templates. And that's how the global registration works in Vue. The obvious downside being unique names everywhere. Yeah, and also, sorry, you have no control over what components can use what other components. So Vue gives you also local registration. So instead of having or calling Vue.component, you just define the options for that component. In this case, we again give it some data in a template, and then in another component somewhere else in your application, you have to define a components property. It's essentially a mapping of I want these sets of options to be represented in my templates. In this case, is Hello World, and then you can call it in your template like you do at the bottom. The important thing to realize is if this component here, the bottom, uses Hello World, says I want to use it, it doesn't go the whole way down. Every child component needs to explicitly say, I want to use this component in my templates as well. Both of these components have kind of, you've seen it already, this data. It's the equivalent of state you see in React, and it has to be a function that returns your initial state. Due to how Vue works under the hood, it has this thing called the reactivity system. So when you create a component, it says, I know, in this case, I know about the property now, and it keeps track of any changes to it. You can't go and add things to your state or your data You can't remove things as you go, but obviously any modifications to now cause the component to go and update itself and match those new values. So if you were at some point in the future to go and change now on that top component, your template would go and update with its new value. Template syntax, it's kind of similar to handlebars, and essentially you've got the double braces or mustache syntax. Inside those, you just evaluate a single JavaScript expression. So here we're just printing out a property name or a variable. You can call a function, you can use ternaries if you wish. What's important to know though is that you can't use these in attributes in your templates. So if you were to, for example, try and do something like this where you want to have a conditional class, if you were then to go and load your component, you would end up with that in your browser. It doesn't evaluate it. So for kind of things in between tags, you'll find to use the braces. For attributes, you need to use something that's called directives. So directives are one of the things that, so I started out with Angular 1. It was my first real JavaScript framework that I used. So this is kind of the thing that reminded me of Angular when I was looking at Vue. They start with a v prefix for their name, and they basically apply changes to the DOM when its expression changed. So probably the most simple one is a v-if directive. Will conditionally render the button element if the result of that expression is logged in is truthy or falsy. So if it's false, then it won't render the element. If it's true, then it will. You've got v-for, so this is how you do loops in Vue. In this case, if we have 3 things in articles, we will go and render 3 article component elements. There's no need to have like map functions. You just define it like that as an attribute, and you can use article inside that tag if you wish. The next one, von, this is how you react to events. So the colon there denotes that the directive takes an argument, in this case the name of the event that you want to respond to. So on a click event, I want to go and call my handle submit function. Won't touch on it now, but you can also pass in modifiers to von directives. So things like event.prevent default that we write quite a lot on things, does it for you, just a little bit of boilerplate that you don't have to worry about when you define methods and things. vModel, again, this is quite an Angular thing. Gives you two-way data binding. So the example at the bottom, as you type in the text box, we print out that value, it updates for us. And if we then cause that property to kind of programmatically change, the text box itself will automatically update. Again, no need to write update handlers, no need to define all those functions to do those things for you. That's all you need in your template, is just to use the vModel directive. And then coming back to our original example with dynamic classes, you'd want to use the vbind directive. So vbind essentially says the result of the expression gets bound to the attribute name you pass in. So in this case, whatever is button off, calling that results in, is used for the value for disabled. So for classes, if you wanted to use that ternary you saw earlier, you'd use vbind and then class and then whatever you wanted it to be. If there are other ways to define classes, you don't have to do them like that all the way through. But yeah, directives obviously they aren't the solution for everything. They're great for kind of simple things, for some control in what you display in your templates. We've got click handlers we're calling, functions we're calling, and in your component you can define methods. So inside the options object that you create for every component, you define a methods property. So this template basically, in short, just you have 2 buttons and you press add, adds one to the number, yeah, you get the deal. And then we print it out. You just call those functions using the von directive in this case, and then you can go and update your data, your state as you see fit. The one thing to notice at this point is that in the functions or the methods you define, you refer to things as this dot. You don't need to in your templates. You just use the property name as it is. Another example, using the vModel directive this time, we define 3 fields, first name, last name, something else. As you type in them, automatically updates the state in your component. And then the bottom line, we want to use 2 of those properties just to display some information. Basically just say hello, whoever you are. Actually, the wrong way to do things in Vue. Vue doesn't, you can do it, but they recommend that you use computed properties. Now, the main difference here is that computed properties cache their result and only update if something that it depends on changes. So in this case, if first name or last name changed, that value will get reevaluated. If something else was to change because it doesn't use it in its definition, it doesn't care. So an example, top line you'll see when I type in the box is the method call. The second one is the computed. As first name or last name change, it goes to update. When something else changes, it doesn't bother, it doesn't need to. Yeah, that's computed properties in Vue. Events. Events are something worth covering. There's more you can look at with events. There's different functions that Vue gives you to deal with things. As I said, my background was Angular 1. Events became very kind of taboo on the project we worked in. It got very messy very quickly. They were way too easy to abuse, and we abused the hell out of them. So events are kind of one of the things I'm a bit unsure about. But essentially, on a click event, you can call one of the functions that Vue components have, which is emit. You give it an event name that you want to refer it to, and then a value. So in this case, when you click that button, you'll emit some event with a random number. Elsewhere in your app, you then have components that can listen to those. So in this case, we implement or we call the emitter component, and we have to say if we care about some event, that on the some event we want to go and perform some action. There's more to events, so you can typically events will bubble to themselves if you don't do anything different. You can, in theory, bubble. Say in theory, you can bubble events to the parent component as well. So in this case, your emitter component can emit some event, so that anything that calls the listener in this case will have to decide whether it wants to use it. Typically, if you think the way that I've seen React components done, where you have a parent component that is all of your logic, all of your state, and then a child component that deals with the template, you might want to emit an event from the child all the way up. You can also emit an event right to the parent component as well. The risk there is that you then have, so components across your app are able to listen to events that fire to parent or root. So if you fire something all the way up from anywhere, any component can listen to it. So in theory, the idea of events bubbling up is lost because something over here can emit an event, and something over here can say, I actually want to listen to it too. In the app I worked in, we did that. It got very messy. We didn't know what did what. It was really hard to debug. So events are essentially in place of providing click handlers and things all the way down, but very easy to abuse. Props are a thing in Vue. Again, you need to use the vbind directive, otherwise you will just, the value of your attribute will just be a string. So, at the bottom there you see vbind to the items property, and we pass in our items property, which is that array at the top. And then other components, this is where it's different in that other components need to explicitly say, I want to know about this prop. So the top component says, I want to know about items. We then use items in our template for that component, and then we call feed item as well, and then feed item has to say, I want to care about these props. It's the one thing that's different that here with props is slightly different than React, at least from what I've seen. You can define prop types here as well. So if you don't just want to provide an array, you can provide an object, key being the prop name, the value being its type if you want to go that far. No need to install another module, it just comes with Vue as is. And props also have one-way data flow, like React as well. So if you change a prop in a child component, it doesn't go and update the state in the parent component. Single file components are one of the things I like the most about Vue. They're also probably one of the ugliest things about Vue. You have 3 tags. You can define your options at the top. In the script tag, you have a template tag for your template, and you have a style tag for any styles. At the moment, we've only really seen string templates. Syntax highlighting is not great. Yeah, it's not fun. Whereas when you put it in a template tag and just write effectively what looks like HTML, you can get highlighting. At this point, to use this, you need a build tool anyway, so you can do imports and exports if you wish. And styles, you can include the scoped attribute to say, I want this to only be available to this component. You can have it use different languages if you want, so SAS or less. And yeah, if you scope it to your component, you include that attribute, it only makes those styles available to your component. It basically does post CSS under the hood, but essentially you just end up with some unique data attributes that mean you don't get any kind of crossing of styles. And on the topic of build tools, both Parcel and Webpack are available. Vue also comes with a CLI if you just want to get off the ground really quick. It does everything for you. It even builds, I think, a basic like Webpack config file for you, so you don't have to worry about any of this. They're both easy, both incredibly simple. Documentation on both from Vue site is enough to get you started. There's one little quirk with Webpack, but again, that's documented. So yeah, you can build both of these or use both of these. So my first impressions of Vue, I'll be honest, I submitted the talk without knowing Vue in a bid to try and force me to learn it. I was like, can you do the talk? So I had to learn it. So my first impressions, I like cleaner templates. Directives, they're not the cleanest thing. But yeah, I don't have to write maps. I don't have to write anything in my template. It's all there. It basically looks like HTML. Single file components I really liked. Again, not everyone's cup of tea, having 3 script tags essentially in one file. Shallower learning curve, again, whether it's because I came from an Angular 1 background, this to me felt quite similar. Whether it was easier for me to kind of pick it up and build something with it, potentially. But generally speaking, I was able to get off the ground a lot quicker than I was with React. I like computed properties. I like the caching. I know you can do something similar in React, but it's really easy to get working out the box. And that example is on CodePen if people want to have a look at it, but it's there. The two-way data binding, again, like removing a lot of the boilerplate that we have to write, for me, probably in some cases will save me time. It only works for text fields, so for things like checkboxes and other inputs, you still need to do some of that work yourself. But for things like text fields and text areas, you already have that for you. Event modifiers, the prevent default case I spoke about, there's some others you can have as well. Again, just prevent you writing some boilerplate code. And if anyone's interested in the performance of this against other frameworks, there's a link there. It's really comprehensive, but Vue's essentially about par. Some people say it's quicker than other frameworks. But yeah, it's pretty performant. And events, so I like it, but I'm unsure. Events make things possible without state management. So we use Redux for React. Vue comes with a framework called, with a kind of another state management module called Vuex. If you decide not to use those, if you just want to have a play, the thing that bugs me about React is passing handlers all the way through if you want something right at the top level of your app. Events with Vue at least make it possible. Like I said, if you're not disciplined and you start everything up to the root component and everything's listening to it throughout your app, it gets very messy, very confusing very quickly. But I didn't like how everything that was defining data, methods, props, or computed property wasn't, maybe namespace isn't the right word, but if you think in React, you've got this.props, this.state. You don't have any of that in Vue. So everything needs to have a unique name. Again, not the end of the world. You'll get an error in your console if you do something like that. But yeah, I could see it being a pain. I didn't particularly like it personally. I went away and I built an app in React, an app in Vue, just to see what they look like. It's on my GitHub if you want to have a look at it, have a play. And I put together a bunch of examples on CodePen, just kind of, I guess, more bite-sized. So things like how do computed properties look, how do they work, if you're interested in either of those. And yeah, that's it. Any questions?